Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to the Next Level Broadcasting Show. I am Eric Huffman along with Jared Stamen and Charles Strail in studio. We will be joined by Shane Smith later on in the program when we get into this week's games of high school football. We have a jam-packed show tonight for you. We will review last week's games, plus dive into the world of college football, talk about Michigan, Michigan State, and maybe spout off the other in-state teams and what they have going on this week as well. We'll also dive into the Detroit Lions and NFL and maybe see what some posing questions might be after this first game of the NFL season.
Right, maybe Overreaction Monday.
Yeah, definitely. Overreaction, armchair quarterback, whatever you want to call it, Monday. And then we'll end the show by previewing this week's games that we're going to be at. We have some exciting games to talk about. But right now, what we'd like to start off this show by talking about the games that we just had this previous week. And Jared, you're going to start off with our game that we had between Elk Rapids visiting Boyne City. I believe it started off kind of just a back and forth affair for a little while, and then it really opened up and for one side. But I'll let you get into that game.
Yeah, Eric, Charles is gonna put on some highlights here, but calling it close in the beginning is it's a bit of a stretch.
I'm finding the positives. Right.
And that's what Elk Rapids has to do, as we're gonna see here. A lot of these highlights are gonna be Boyne City. They had a phenomenal game. Final score was 36-0, and the opening was a little close, as Eric said, but a lot of it was Boyne City beating themselves. As you're gonna see, Drew Neer, the senior quarterback for Boyne City, threw for a few touchdowns there. Owen Hewitt, one of the primary benefactors in the backfield, getting himself a touchdown along with 2 interceptions. Big problem for the Elks. Total of, I believe it was 4 turnovers, 3 interceptions, and a fumble. Not
this was
really
a big play right here, man. Look at this.
This was the highlight. Owen Hewitt made, I believe it was 4-man miss there. He actually didn't get the touchdown. He was down on just the 1-yard line there, but it looked like he was going to be going there all the way.
2, sidestep a third,
and then there's 4. Yeah, he makes 2 guys miss on that second cut, and then he almost gets away with the 5th for the touchdown. And Owen Hewitt was really the MVP of that game. Defense and offense making tons of plays on both sides. But Elk Rapids is looking to bounce back next week. We'll get into that a little bit more later, but they should be maybe seeing a first win, hopefully some points, as they still, between first 2 weeks, have 0 points on the board. But so good things to build on. Good some line. They had a sophomore in there. Saylor was the last name. He had a great game, making some good effort plays there. So, there's some things to build on, but overall, still a lot to improve upon. The week 1 highlights, as we saw, not a lot of
I'll give you 2 small questions then. For the Boyne City side, do you see any weaknesses in their game after 2 weeks? And on Elk Rapids side, I guess, what's one thing that they need to focus on to improve as they have not scored a point yet in 2 weeks in?
Well, for Boyne City, honestly, the biggest gripe I can say, Eric, was they beat themselves.
Okay.
A ton of penalties. Really, the best defense that was played all night was them against themselves. They had at least, I want to say, 10-plus false start, just pre-snap penalties, and they still scored 36 points. So, they can clean that up. They could have put at least 50 points on, I think. And for Elk Rapids, I really think it's getting Flutie comfortable out there. They get themselves in a hole, and then they try to air it out. And Flutie tries to go downfield. The pocket can't hold up, trying to do too much, and he'll throw an interception. Just getting the ball out flat to his playmakers and making those yards stack up from players making plays versus arm yards.
Yep, yeah, that's thanks for the insight, and hopefully Elk Rapids can find a way. Small victories, obviously, right now. Let's put some points on the board and then go from there. They have a nice matchup that we'll get into later on in the show tonight at Asco.
Yeah, absolutely.
But again, we'll talk about that later. And for Boyne City, just keeps marching on. Another year, another Boyne City Rambler team 2-0 and looking to be one of the bigger, tougher components in Northern Michigan again this year.
Looks like it.
So moving on, we'll go into the second game. Charles, I think you're going to go over a game that Tom Clementson was at. Gaylord St. Mary's at Central Lake.
Yeah, so this one was a pretty interesting game, and Tom Clementson was there. Tom unable to make it here tonight, so I'll be filling in and running through these highlights. And it was a game that St. Mary started off very slow. Central Lake came out and hit them in the mouth. right away.
Cuts back,
You
and
see
he's got
Grant
himself
Miller
a
here and a couple
touchdown
of
in the
other
end zone there.
Central Lake Trojans
Drop
that
back
really
looking
were
for a
able
pass,
to
and he's
ground
got
and
one
pound the
there.
Snowbirds. This
Able
air
to get
attack
that pass
that
threaded,
Central
though,
Lake
and
was
that's
putting
Miller
on
on the
display.
catch
The
as he
Snowbirds
cuts
didn't
back,
have an
looking
answer.
for some room to run,
And
goes
once they
back
got
to the
out in
other
space,
side.
the
He's
Snowbirds
got
couldn't
wide
find
open
the
seam and
Trojans
lots
and
of
bring them down
speed.
to the ground. So it was
Check
one of
that.
those things where it
That
was a
was
good
Josiah
litmus
Chellis
test game for
on
Gaylord
the
St. Mary to
reception
see where a team comes
subsequent
out and
touchdown
punches
run.
them in the
Looking for
mouth
Royce and
first,
gets him on
because
that
St.
left
Mary,
side.
they had to
Nice
play
little
back
stutter
here. As you
step
see
and go,
Cal
and he's
Royce
down the
here catching this
sideline.
one down the
10-5
sideline and
touchdown.
taking it all the way for the touchdown. They were
He's gonna
down
take
12-0
it.
here.
He cuts inside.
12
That's
minutes
a
into the game.
that is a running back
11:34
move
here.
right
Let me
there,
bring this
Charlie
back,
Cameron.
because I think it's worthy of noting
Royce
that
gets him on that left
it was
side. Nice little stutter step and go, and he's down the
just
sideline.
into
10-5
the start of the
touchdown.
second quarter. It was the first half that Royce
He's gonna
scored.
take it.
So
He
the
cuts
Snowbirds were
inside.
held
That's
scoreless in that first quarter.
that is a running
and
back
because
move
of the
right there.
Trojan
Charlie
defense, it was
Cameron
the St. Mary
cuts it
comeback
in
that
and
allowed them
gets
to
the two-point
prevail
conversion
over
for the
Central Lake. And I
Snowbirds.
think it
That's
was a good testament to the
blitz
sheer
and-
will
and
that
it's
the Snowbirds
nearly
have this
picked
year on
off. It
this
was
roster,
actually in his
because
hands.
they didn't get
And
out to a
somehow-
good start. They did not play good football in the first 12 minutes of this game, and for them to come back and win, it really showed a lot of resolve and character. And you hear some of the highlights of the audio there of Tom Clemetson on play-by-play for those initial St. Mary touchdowns, and you can hear it in his voice. He was waiting for this Snowbird team to wake up, and right here, like you see it, it's 20-8, and St. Mary's down, and then Nathan O'Connell scoots in for the touchdown there, and multiple points in this game. They were down 2 scores in double digits, came back and fought all the way back to win this one 34-20. So really good effort. And here's another Cal Royce touchdown. And St. Mary needed this one, a big confidence booster, and look for them to keep it going.
We could almost sense it when we were texting back and forth with Tom once we found out that he wasn't going to be able to make it, and he was kind of giving us his notes and whatnot. I almost sense it just by the texting that he really wasn't sure if maybe they got exposed a little bit, or if they if they were possibly playing down until they kind of ramped it up. Was the 34-20 score what it was supposed to be, or were they capable for a much better game?
So that was one of the things. St. Mary will be playing home tomorrow night versus Forest Area Fife Lake. We'll break that game down in our final segment, our final bit here this evening. But we got to keep it rolling, because we've got highlights from East Jordan at Joburg coming up next, and that one was more one-sided. But man, you guys will be doing the East Jordan versus Kalkaska game, so we'll be able to break down this East Jordan versus Joburg from Week 2 highlight and kind of walk us through what you saw from East Jordan at Joburg. Let's go ahead and cue that one up. Here we go.
Well, I was watching some of the highlights, Eric, and one of the first things you're going to see before this starts is William Webb taking this to go all the way. As we're loading up the highlight here, this is actually the first play of offense for the Red Devils, and it was a little bit of read option look. The commentators actually believe that he does have that he handed off to the running back, ends up Webb keeps in it, going down for 6 points. What a way to start the game.
Yeah, not too much to talk about with this game. You don't know what you can get to improve on with a 51-0 score. Again, you're looking at Joburg. We talked about last week too. Usually a traditional winning school. I haven't the last couple of years, kind of in the rebuilding mode right now, and I obviously seen in the 51-0 score. So hopefully they can get that turned around. But East Jordan turning around and having a interesting matchup that we'll get into later on this week. A couple of 2-0 teams squaring up, but are they really 2-0 teams? We'll talk about that after a while.
I think that's another Will Webb highlight right there. Or excuse me, that's not a Will Webb highlight. Go ahead, Jared. This is your highlight. I just jumped in on it.
Oh, it's okay. I was just going to say, if that was Will Webb out there, you'll see plenty of those, and we're going to see a ton of them next week. He really is a highlight machine out there, got the legs, and he was a wide receiver last year, so, he knows how to make those cornerbacks miss, and it's kind of a matchup he's maybe more comfortable with.
And if you see Jared and I kind of smiling and kind of bantering back and forth, because we'll be together tomorrow night doing the East Jordan and Kalkaska game.
We sure will.
This is a game that obviously that we're looking forward to doing.
And once again, I want to highlight here, first play from scrimmage for East Jordan. Take a look at this. I mean, you want to talk about really just hitting your opponent in the mouth right away. There's Will Webb taking this one all the way. It was a 53-yard touchdown run.
And again, I said last week too, I fell in love with their offensive line. It looks like obviously another good showing by them.
Yeah, and in week 1, actually, Charles and I were up in Manistee watching East Jordan. The highlight players were the center guard combo.
Yeah, I think this guy said you had your player of the game last week was an lineman or something like that. Or,
I believe that's. I think Charles
Thomas
was,
Mayhew was our player of the game week 1.
So moving on, let's go into our next game. Charles, what's the next game you got queued up
so
for
the
us?
next game I want to queue up for us is Charlevoix versus Sheboygan, and this game.
This was one of the tighter games of the
Yes,
week, and getting into the highlights too. And let's talk about Sheboygan real quick. Sheboygan, an up and comer, not really a winning team, a winning program the last few years, but yet coming into this game having a win and putting out a good showing against a scrappy Charlevoix team.
It really was, and Shane Smith was here at this game, and it was a 19-6 final score. And I mean, you look at it, and it was just back and forth pretty much the whole game. And then Charlevoix pulled away at the final 12, 15 minutes of this game. So the score is not truly indicative of how this game felt while the game was being played.
You're catching a few of the highlights here, and it looked like kind of a back and forth affair. I was checking in. I was sitting at home this past week and not able to make it to one of the games, dealing with some issues around the house. Was able to check in all the games too, and it just seemed like Charlotte was just kind of waiting to show up, and then just finally they were able to put it together and pull it out in the second half. Yeah,
I actually talked to Shane Smith after this game, and that's kind of what he said. It just was kind of a waiting game, waiting for Charlotte to take that leap, and they eventually did, but it took a little longer than was expected.
And we'll talk about Charlevoix's upcoming game going to Tawas this week, and we'll get into that later on in the show. But let's move on to our.
Got a quick little cameo.
Oh, you got a little cameo here, real quick.
Cameo shout out here. We want to give that cameo to head coach Don Jess because we got a nice shot of him right on the sideline, signaling first or their ball. So
good first down signal there. Anyway, nice job. Any way helping out, making everything better.
Right,
it's a bonus.
I do want to give a shout out to a sideline camera operator there, Ron Lugin, working the sidelines at the Charlevoix football games, able to get some excellent photography. Here's another shot from Ron right down the sideline here of this Charlevoix touchdown run by Ian Moran. So that was the one that put the game up 2 scores, a little bit out of reach for Sheboygan. So Charlevoix going 2-0. They'll be taking on Tawas tomorrow night. Shane Smith will be there, and Shane and company will be there. So let's keep it moving on, and we'll check out the Traverse City St. Francis highlight.
Yeah, this is the game you did, right, Charles?
Yeah, this was a really good game last week because it was a test of Division 5 Ogemaw Heights and Division 6 Traverse City St. Francis. And watching these highlights, you're going to say, wow, this was a barn burner game. It actually came down. Ogemaw Heights scored on the opening possession, then Braxton Lisinski runs it in here for the touchdown for the Gladiators. After that, the Gladiators were able to rattle off 14 straight points, but not before Ogemaw Heights made it 12-7 on this 77-yard Connor Lampert touchdown run where he was untouched. And at this point in time, you're starting to have some panic attacks from 2 years ago when the Gladiators played Ogemaw Heights. And not this team. This team, here's Cooper Sellers from 24 yards out, scampering in untouched, and he did a great job there. After that, the Gladiators get an interception by Sam Wildfong, boom. And now they're set up deep within Falcon territory, and you're going to see a good little handoff to Evan Bellinger right up the middle as he scored that one. And they would actually go into the halftime locker room up by 9 points. So it was 21-12 going into halftime. And then Calvin Marshall rips off one to score the first points of the second half. And then it was 21-18 up 3. But this was the turning point. This is Lisinski again. And he caught this one down the sideline. He went and he scored on the swing back pass at St. Francis. That's kind of their staple play when they need a big one. But Ogemaw Heights wasn't done. There's Marshall again. So you can kind of get the sense we're in a shootout. And here's a really nice corner route and ball. That's, once again, Sam Wildfong on the receiving end. But, here's Marshall. Marshall had 3 touchdowns in the second half of this game alone.
Is there something with St. Francis's defense? Obviously, 32 points is a lot for a St. Francis team to give up. Is there something there that you're seeing that some hole or something that could be improved on?
Well, I think what you're seeing right now is they made the plays when they needed to make. So here's a play that I just want to highlight. This was a deflected ball on one of the last series of the possession, and there's either defense. This one just going to go right into the hands of Gabe Pfeifferich, and that was basically the play to seal the game. And they really needed that one, and then it was victory formation after that as St. Francis claimed the victory because, looking back on it, they really needed that win in order for them to continue on in their schedule because their schedule gets very, very difficult as they continue to move throughout week 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 because right now, tomorrow they'll be going to Benzie Central. You would like to think that St. Francis, after coming off of a big win, would feel some good momentum going into that game. But that's a game that is a rivalry game. Benzie Central will not lay down for the Traverse City St. Francis Gladiators, so they will need to bring their A game in order to come out victorious at Benzie.
Is St. Francis a team, as we're leading up against the break here, are they a team marching forward or a team with question marks after the first couple?
I would say they have some good things to build off of. I don't think their question marks are as profound as they were coming into the season. I think the game that Tyler Endress put together at Ogama Heights when they found themselves down, the offense didn't panic, and they were able to go into halftime up 21-12. They scored 14 straight points to end the second quarter, actually shut out Ogama Heights in the second quarter as well. So that was really big in my opinion. And there was a play that didn't make the highlight reel, but on the opening kickoff of the third quarter, Tyler Thompson actually took it back for a score. And the play did not count. It was wiped off the board because there were offsetting personal foul penalties during the play, which was the first time that I've ever seen offsetting personal fouls during the play cause a redo of the down. So that wiped that one away, and they would have scored 21 unanswered points, assuming they make the point after attempt there, if they're able to get that touchdown on the opening kickoff of the third quarter. So I think right now St. Francis, their strength relies on their offense and special teams. Their special teams execution was very, very good. And then causing turnovers. I don't think their defense right now is truly where they want to be in midseason or end of season form. But what they're doing is forcing turnovers and getting those takeaways. They forced 3 interceptions against the Ogama Heights Falcons last week. So when they're able to get those takeaways, right now their offense is so efficient because they can run the ball. They've shown the ability to pass the football as well. So their offense right now is really, really efficient, and when their defense is giving them the ball back, it's really hard to stop them. That's my take.
Well, that's going to do it for our first segment, going over last week's games. When we come back, we're going to talk Michigan State and Michigan football, talk about their games from last week, and talk about their upcoming games from this week, too, after we come back from a break from TVC Cherry Capital Airport.
There we go.
Say that 5 times fast. TVC Cherry Capital Airport. Stay tuned.
Hi, it's Kevin Klein from TVC Airport, proud to help keep you connected to high school sports in Northern Michigan, so you can stay in the game all season long with TVC, your Northern Michigan connection.
And welcome back to the Next Level Broadcasting Show. Eric Huffman, Jared Stamen, and Charles Strail in studio, being joined by Shane Smith a little later on in the broadcast. Right now, we like to move on to some college football, and let's talk with Charles and my team of the state, Michigan State University football. I was 2-0 after a 2 overtime win over Boston College, 42-40. Charles, did you watch all of that game?
I actually did watch all of that game. I was fortunately in a position to do so Saturday night. It was, like a 7:45 tip, and because of that, I was able to watch that game. And I was pretty pleased. Just looking at it, you see, I got my Sparty board in the background, and everything with that. I was just really pleased with how they showed up and played.
Well, and the big talk about that was obviously Aiden Childs, and he's been the talk going into the season, and he is the talk after week 2. Really had, I don't want to say a coming out party because we've known of the talent, But he was really expressive. I don't know if you saw any of the post-game footage, Charles, but he is really excited and expressive after pulling out this win. So I don't know if this is a really good stepping stone or notch in his belt for him in his progression, too, to make him even that much better, because it's kind of been one of those, he's progressed with not as many inconsistencies as we saw last year in 2 weeks. But it's not quite the complete game yet, but you know that it's coming. So you think it's just a matter of time. But what's going to happen this week is they're going to turn around and have to face a dual threat quarterback in Youngstown State, and Bo Brungard, I believe is how it's pronounced. Youngstown State, the Missouri Valley, they're coming in at 2-0 as well. And this dual threat quarterback ran for over 260 yards and 4 touchdowns, including 1 throwing score as well, in a 56-17 defeat of Robert Morris last week. So it'll be interesting to see. The defense was good enough to stop the run this past week. Boston College had a really nice quarterback, and I was talking to Charles about that. Yeah, I thought he was really nice, especially in the first half. Almost liked him more than Childs. But he looked really good, and obviously State able to pull off the win. But I'll be curious to see what State's defense will do against a dual threat quarterback. Charles, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think what Michigan State really has to do is develop a edge rush. And one of the things that they haven't been able to show so far through 2 games, and even last year as well, is the ability to rush the passer. Can they stay within those rush lanes and keep gap integrity as they want to pressure the Youngstown State offensive line and quarterback? You don't want to let a running quarterback get flushed out of the pocket, because that's when they're at their best. That's when they can use their ability, their legs, to their advantage and put the defense in different types of binds. Anticipate a lot of zone coverage for Michigan State, because you don't want to play man. If you play man, you turn your back, or the cornerbacks will turn their back to the quarterback. Cornerbacks turning their back to the quarterback. And what that allows is for that scrambling quarterback to escape the pocket and then pick up chunk yardage after being flushed out of the pocket. So expect a lot of zone. If they do bring it, expect a zone pressure. If Michigan State wants to bring their pressure systems, and I got to say, Michigan State pressured, they brought a lot of blitzes against Boston College and did not get home against Lonergan. So if they're going to bring pressure, they need to get home. Otherwise, rush your 3, rush your 4, drop back in zone coverage, and hope that the quarterback doesn't use his legs against you to extend the play and then have your defense break down. Because right now, I don't think that they're going to be able to cover in space for extended periods of time, so they're going to have to figure out some way to bring some exotic pressure packages. And when they do bring those packages, make sure that they actually affect the internal time clock of Youngstown State's quarterback in the pocket.
Yeah, I think setting the edge is obviously number one priority against a dual threat. Obviously, if they can get around the edge, then that makes everybody an option. And you don't want them being able to run the option even off of that. But Jared, real quick to you, the one thing about Michigan State too is their youth. Childs is young still. You got Nick Marsh, second-year receiver there. But let's talk about one of the transfers real quick, and making sure that you're not doing too much that you hurt the team. I think it's Omari Kelly. Is that the one?
One of the receivers.
Yeah, at incoming transfer the week before was like the best player on the field. This past week, though, looked like he was trying to do a little bit too much. Trying to jump over a guy, almost lost the ball. But in the end, ended up catching the winning 2-point conversion at the end of the game. How do you get in your headspace to try to make sure that you're not trying to overdo it on the field or the court or whatever you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, actually, Eric, I think that's a great point to bring up, not only for Michigan State, but you could even throw that in for 2 other, Michigan, another school with their quarterback, and also with, Arch Manning. It's just, there's been a lot of guys this year that have these big names, and, this is their year to break out, and are we expecting too much from these guys too fast? I'm not as familiar with Michigan State, more of a pro guy, in focus. But I think there is a lot of pressure on these kids with all the NIL money they're getting. It's almost like a mini pro. And it's putting that much more of a spotlight and pressure on these guys. And they already had a big spotlight pressure playing in a Big Ten school, but then you're going to add money incentives that's on the table, and everyone can see that. I think these guys expect they have to be a star from day one, and that's going to be a hump that a lot of these young guys are going to have to overcome.
Well, the hard part is playing within yourself instead of overdoing it to prove yourself. Which was possibly the case with Amari Kelly too. Again, possible turnover, but again, able to contribute, and looks like he's going to have a nice future here at Michigan State. So let's move on to the team just down 65 miles or so in the other direction. Michigan Wolverines, coming off a 24-13 loss to Oklahoma. Justice Haynes ran for 125 yards, but the most talk seems to be about Bryce Underwood, going only 9 of 24 for 142 yards. And most of the talk I saw on social media was about the handling of Bryce Underwood. Did Michigan handle their scheme right? And did they handle Bryce Underwood correctly? Or should things have been done differently to give him a better chance to be successful? And I'll start with you, the Michigan man, Jared.
Well, I've kind of gone back and forth on this, Eric, because when you have a kid, the number one, guy out of his class, local kid, he's familiar with the school and the expectations. He knows what he's getting himself into. He came in with those expectations for himself even. But then you look at it from the other side, and as of today, he's been 1 month. August 11th was his birthday. So he's been 18. He's been able to vote for only 1 month. So this guy is a really young guy, and I kind of want to throw him in the fire because, you saw it a little bit in week 1. That guy's got an arm, and he's got talent right there. He can zip those balls into spots that you're surprised that a guy at 18 has that type of strength. But are they going to try, they have those running backs, they have an offensive line, and Michigan does have an identity, and that is not quarterback play. But you get, you're introducing an X-factor type of quarterback. So I think they're just kind of in an adjustment period, trying to get some, baby steps for this young guy, get him comfortable with, the first road game against a big-time school in Oklahoma. So all things considered, I'm not freaking out as much as some people, have been. And I can see why they handled it the way they did. I think it's still a little too early to tell. And knowing that, next week there's going to be a new head coach for the next 2 games, does that throw off what they're doing? A lot of moving pieces in that Michigan Wolverine locker room.
Well, when he did pass, he was under duress and never really seemed comfortable. Charles, are there any other issues like the offensive line? It's really not typical to talk about offensive line issues with the Michigan Wolverines.
Yeah, right now I just think their offensive line needs some more continuity. I thought that the game versus Oklahoma was not as close as the score indicated. It felt like it was a 2, maybe a 3-score game. Just never really felt like Michigan could get their footing underneath them. So, that's just my thought there.
So Michigan turns around and plays Central this week in Ann Arbor. Central 1-1 currently. And Ann Arbor, 27.5-point favorite, I think, earlier in the day when I was looking. Is that a good spread, guys? Is that too high, too low?
First of all, since we're talking about Central Michigan, I do want
Connor Stalings won't be in the building, I don't believe.
I do want to give a shout out to 2024 Charlevoix graduate Landon Swanson. Landon Swanson is a sophomore on the Central Michigan University football team. He'll be playing special teams, going to the Big House. So I want to give a shout out to Charlevoix football, as Landon Swanson will be representing Charlevoix Raider Nation down there at the Big House on Saturday, and he'll be getting some PT.
And was this any type of a trap game in any way? Is the game going to be closer at all than expected, or should it be the blowout that they're thinking about?
I think Central Michigan has an opportunity to cover this point spread, truthfully, because you look at what they did out against, they played at, was it not San Diego State, but Fresno, no, not Fresno, it's slipping my mind right now, but they won week 1 out in California. And since then, now they're coming back to play at Michigan. This is a lot of same players that are familiar with one another, as they might have gone to high school together, might have been recruited or not recruited by Michigan. So I think the 27.5 point spread for Central Michigan is something that I'd be willing to lay the points and say, hey, fire up chips.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to the trenches. Can they stop the run? Because, with the intern head coach, and the intern head coach is a lineman at heart, I think they're just going to try and see if you can stop,
old-fashioned Michigan ground and pound, right?
I think that's really going to be the story of that 27.5. If they stop the run, I think they have a good chance. If not, I think you could see them win by 35 or more.
To close out the rest of the state of Michigan, 0-2 Eastern goes to Kentucky this weekend, and 0-2 Western gets to go to number 9 Illinois.
Here's your prize.
For a fun matchup. That'll do it for our college segment of the show. We're going to take another break, and when we come back, we'll talk Detroit Lions. After this break from one of my favorite places, the Lake House. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
With unique gifts, home accessories, wedding items, and so much more, the Lake House on Bridge Street offers so many things to make your home or even your visit to Charlevoix that much more special. When you want beautiful items that reflect Charlevoix the beautiful, stop in or visit them online at thelakehousecharlevoix.com for your own keepsake and your own personal memory of Charlevoix.
And welcome back to the Next Level Broadcasting Show. Eric Huffman, Jared Stamen, and Charles Straley in studio, about to be joined by Shane Smith here in our next segment. But right now, let's move on to some Detroit Lions football. Let's get all excited for 0-1. Losing to the Green Bay Parsons, 24-13.
Oh, take a victory lap, Eric. I know you want to take a victory lap.
The guys are giving me a hard time here because I pretty much picked Green Bay in one of the other shows to win the division, and I put a waiver claim in for Green Bay's defense as soon as the trade happened, and so he's on my fantasy. They're on my fantasy team, so yeah, I'm a Green Bay fan apparently at the moment. The guys are giving me flack for. But the Lions again, Trevin Lambeau and face the Packers, and obviously very difficult with the score. And frankly, the offense just couldn't find a rhythm. And what were your key takeaways from the game, Charles?
First, let's start with Jared, because I know Jared has some affinity here, as he also picked the Lions to win the NFC North Division, but we saw right away that Green Bay is not to be taken lightly.
Yeah, and, this is going to hit one of Charles here a little bit too close to home as a big Jared Goff fan, but quite frankly, you give that guy not an elite coordinator, what do you got? You got the Jared Goff that got traded out of L.A. I mean, quite frankly, I like Jared Goff. He's got my name. I've been rooting for him since he was out of Cal, first overall pick. But, there's a point in life where the reality sets in. The reality is this guy, doesn't matter who the weapons are, if he doesn't know who he's throwing the ball to, he's not going to make great choices. And it doesn't help as well when your all-pro right tackle kind of gets destroyed by a new division rival in Micah Parsons. And that's just going to make it that much harder. That path to the NFC North title is just a rough one.
Well, let's talk about what's supposed to be the mainstay of Detroit Lions football right now, that offensive line. What happened? I know I watched a bunch of hype videos last year of Penei Sewell just ramping up those guys, getting ready to come out there and put the whoop on somebody. He seemed to be tossed around like a rag doll last week. Jared, you want to elaborate on a little bit of offensive line issues?
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that, Eric, because my Bengals actually picked a couple picks before the Lions, and they drafted Jamar Chase over Penei Sewell. And last year, a lot of Bengals people were hearing a lot of flack for not, Jamar Chase this, but you can't block. Well, Penei Sewell, don't get me wrong, he's going against a future All-Pro, multiple-year Hall of Famer in Micah Parsons. I mean, it's unfair to be like, well, he sucks after 1 week, but that is a weakness that you would have really never thought you'd see, that the right tackle, number 58, is kind of looking like an average guy out there. And I think in hindsight, just because of my Bengals, we did escape week 1. It was a terrible loss, but you know what? We never do. We'll take that 1-0 win, and I think you take skill positions over the line.
Obviously they had red zone woes and obviously offensive line struggles, and it really hurt the running game. It was at 44 combined yards between the two backs, I believe, and Goff under constant pressure. He got sacked, 3 or 4 times, I think, too. Laporta had a decent game, under 100 yards, but still, I think 79 yards receiving. Jack Campbell, 10 tackles, so he had a nice defensive game. Coach Campbell called them correctable mistakes. Yes, they are correctable, but they've got to be correctable within the head too. Is this something that this team can turn around and look like the Lions team that's been traveling and taking over other teams' stadiums, or are these the Lions that we always thought they were and we just got teased a little bit?
I don't really think we've got teased. I think Dan Campbell is still a premier head coach in the league, but it's just it's a whole new system. When you lose your offensive coordinator and your defensive coordinator, and they both go out, and the DC didn't win week 1, but I mean putting up 30+ points against the Steelers defense, it's quite the win week 1 in my eyes. So they lost some really great talent, and I think it's showing. Frank Ragnow, their starting center, he's out, and
He's been called.
yeah, he's been called a few times. I think his phone hasn't really
I
stopped
think other
ringing.
teams have called him too.
Oh, as they should. I mean, he was one of the best best centers in the league, and you thought you had multiple years still left in him, and I believe he was 29 or 30 when he retired. So it's really just been a rough offseason for this Lions, all things considered. They'd like to get the other edge guy next to Aiden Hutchinson. That never happened. They did pick up some good corners in free agency, but it's a rocky road. They lost a ton of talent, and I just think they still are the Detroit Lions. I think we'll see a bounce back against the Bears. But
Before we look forward to this week's matchup with them, my last question is, with the way they looked, were the Lions a product of the system because they lost 2 coordinators and we saw what we saw in week 1? Or, again, is it correctable and it's just a matter of spending enough time together, although it seemed like they had a decent offseason?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of both, kind of a basic answer. But my kind of equation to this is actually, again, with the Bengals, we lost, a couple years ago, Brian Callahan, the new Titans head coach.
Joe Burrow's my fantasy quarterback, by the way.
Well, I do apologize. But, hey, against the Browns, he actually historically has been bad. But besides that, you can replace good coordinating talent, but it's really hard to because with a guy like Ben Johnson, a lot of times it's, okay, this got a good system. He can integrate this because he's got good players. And there's other guys that are just such good coordinators that no matter what the players are, you can't just go in there and replicate it. We got lucky in Bengals with our Brian Callahan not really being that great of an OC and our talent carrying him. And then our new guy came in and picked it right back up, actually doing better, funny enough, offensively. And Detroit, you kind of saw the opposite. You saw, even though the talent is nothing to scoff at, the coordinators is really what brought all that talent into winning football.
So now let's look forward. Lions heading home to Ford Field for their second week matchup to face the Chicago Bears and the Ben Johnson Bowl. Charles, any insight on that one?
Before we jump in on this, I gotta just offer my take
because I can't take the Jared Goff slander anymore. I mean, the dude is 81 and 53 as a starter, and as a Detroit Lion quarterback, he's 31, 17 and 1. Like, let's give him a pass here with one bad game. His offensive line was blowing run fits left and right. Their center guard combination of Christian Mahogany, Tate Ratledge, and Graham Glasgow absolutely sucked because anytime that those two had to get a combo block or make the right communication or a line shift or a line call, picking up a blitz, they blew it. So you could take any quarterback
in there and put him in that position. You could take Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson. Both those guys have very good offensive lines, and they would blow it. So, I mean, I don't really think that we should be slandering Jared Goff here. I mean, he's given us a track record that he can win with anyone. The only places that he's been at, he's won. So ultimately, the common denominator is not the offensive coordinator. It's Jared Goff. He's a winner. He's the common denominator of why he's 81 and 53 and 1 in his career.
His jersey's in the mail, by the way.
Yeah, I actually believe I saw this stat, and I tried to find it. So I'm off by maybe 1 or 2 wins, I mean more losses, but I think it was Jared Goff was either 2 or 0 in 17, or it was 19 with a coordinator not Sean McVay or Ben Johnson. Just leave that one out there.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, ultimately, like he's only had those coordinators, so like actually, ultimately, is he a product of them or is he a product of himself? Because he's won games no matter if he's with one coordinator. Oftentimes you see coordinators or quarterbacks only have success with one coordinator. I mean, look at Tom Brady. Tom Brady had success with McDaniels. He had success with Bruce Arians. He had success to a lesser degree with the most recent OC they had in Tampa. I believe it was a former quarterback himself, but the name is slipping my mind. But Like Jared Goff has had 2 offensive
Leftwich.
coordinators. Yeah, Byron Leftwich. Good call there. Appreciate that, Eric. And so ultimately, like the run game sucked. The offensive line was a disaster. This is not a Jared Goff thing. I think it's the Lions more so not establishing a rhythm and continuity within their offensive line, 3 of which now are starting at different positions than they played last year, and it showed.
So moving on to the Ben Johnson Bowl, and again, Johnson, the architect of that high-powered offense. What do you have for an insight going against your former offense against your today's offense, Charles?
So one of the things that I did not like from a defensive standpoint of the Detroit Lions is that on critical 3rd downs, Calvin Shepard decided to drop our best pass rushers into pass coverage. What are we doing? Aiden Hutchinson, I don't need him 8 yards playing zone coverage. Or Marcus Davenport, the dude's 290 pounds. I don't need to see him dropping into a zone and bringing an edge pressure from the other side. They're our best pass rushers. Our GM, Brad Holmes, has said that they like their guys. They think Davenport can be a great complementary piece to Aiden Hutchinson when he's healthy. And if that's the case, let him get to the quarterback. And we didn't get to the quarterback. I think Aiden Hutchinson had as many stats as I had on my couch eating Frito-Lays, because Hutchinson, I think, had 2 total QB pressures. And that being said, Micah Parsons played 21 snaps and had a greater impact than Aiden Hutchinson did. So maybe that's a little carryover from the impact of the injury. But, ultimately the defense, I think they need to pull their head out, because they've got to figure out their schematic in times that they need to ramp up the pressure. And ultimately, I didn't think the defense was the reason they lost the game. They only really had a couple of blown coverages, a couple of missed assignments in the first half. I was much more impressed with the defense in the second half and their ability to get off the field. They had an opportunity to get that interception for the touchdown by Brian Branch. It was called back ultimately by illegal contact on Rocky Sin. So there were some plays in that game. Also, Alex Anzalone had a potential interception go right off of his fingertips on a drive that Green Bay went on to score. So they got some things to clean up. Ultimately, from my perspective, the defense, just don't do boneheaded stuff. Don't drop your best pass rushers into coverage on 3rd and long. That's dumb.
So, long story short, ending this segment, the Lions need to, and the new guys coming in, need to go full speed ahead and play to win instead of trying not to lose.
I think they need to try not to lose. I think they need to get back to running the football. Against Green Bay, they came out and tried to run the football. I didn't necessarily have a problem with their game plan. I had a problem with the way that they just flat out couldn't execute it. Last year, Green Bay, the Lions were able to gash them running up the middle with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, and their internal offensive linemen just couldn't get the job done this week. It's as plain and simple as that. And then when they got into 3rd and long, Jared Goff was getting pressured and heated up in the pocket by Micah Parsons and Rashawn Gary and anyone else that Green Bay was bringing pressure with. So that's why Jared Goff had, I believe, 31 completions in that game, and they were all under, or his average target for completion was like under 5 yards. So they got to change that as well.
Well, that's going to do it for this segment. When we come back, let's get back into high school football and talk about our Week 3 matchups. After this break from Charlevoix State Bank, you're watching Next Level Broadcasting Show. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back again to the Next Level Broadcasting Show. Eric Huffman, Jared Stamen, Charles Strail, and we finally opened the door and let Shane Smith in for this last segment of the night. And getting back into high school football for week 3. And Shane, thanks for making it here for the show tonight. And we're going to get right into your game, a 2-0 Charlevoix squad going to Tawas to face a 1-1 team. And again, Charlevoix coming off a 19-6 win over Sheboygan. Tawas coming off a big 44-14 win over Erie Mason. But you got any insights for the game coming up?
Well, I will say one thing I've looked into is I've been in college the last few days, so my note-taking process will certainly begin tonight into tomorrow. But one thing I did notice with Tawas is that they're a very junior and senior-heavy team this year. They've gone through a lot of losses the last couple of years, so they're a squad that's got a lot of maybe pent-up anger and energy built in, as we saw with that Erie win here just last week, and so that could be a potential upset game depending on how things go with Charlevoix. I will say, over the last 4 years since Charlevoix has been covered by Next Level Broadcasting, the next 4 teams in Charlevoix's schedule, Tawas included, Charlevoix's gone 10-1 against, allowing a total of 105 points scored in those 11 games. So, although these are all the division opponents for Charlevoix to be playing, this isn't going to be the meat and potatoes of their schedule per se, unless if there's an upset. Again, Tawas, we could be on the lookout. They've had a strong start to the season. Benzie Central, the only other team of those 4 to have beaten Charlevoix within the last 4 years, and that was in 2022, I believe, a 21-14 score. So we'll see how this goes. Again, Tawas will be an interesting game, but if Charlevoix plays like they did in the second half last week, I would say they score. The over-under is set at 4.5 touchdowns. I don't think they'd have any problem getting to that between their passing and running game. I think a 28 to 35 point game is very much in Charlevoix's capability against Tawas coming up tomorrow. So we'll have to see. But then we're loaded up for bear for Mansell and Boyne City, Kingsley there to end the season.
My quick question to you will be then, we talked about in the highlights from last week, is kind of the slow start. You were kind of waiting for Charlevoix to show up and then eventually take it over versus Sheboygan. Can they afford to do that this week, do you think, or should they come right out of the gates and be ready this week?
If they want to quickly squander any efforts by Tawas, I'd say they better go right out of the gates. But they've been able to take care of both of their first 2 games against Unionville-Sebewaing and then against Sheboygan, thank you, the last 2 weeks by getting slow starts. Very slow to start against Unionville-Sebewaing first quarter and a half. We saw the same thing last week. It wasn't until really the end, it was the final drive of the second quarter into the third quarter that Charlevoix really started to get the steam going behind them. And then once they built up, I believe it was a 3 touchdown lead, 3 score lead rather. Then they let off the gas in the fourth quarter. So I think that's not something that they want to continue doing throughout the rest of this season as they run into more difficult teams in the latter half. But I don't think they should face too big of an issue against Tawas if that were to happen this week. But again, for practice sake and building up for tougher opponents and obviously a run into the postseason, it's in their best interest to start out firing on all cylinders coming in.
Yep. Thanks so much, Shane.
Yep.
And thanks for making it, buddy. We appreciate it.
Good to see
Always
you
good
guys.
to see you.
Yeah.
We're going to move on. Jared, we'll talk briefly here. Game coming up, Elk Rapids going to Oscoda. 0-2 Elk Rapids and Oscoda 1-1. We thought this was going to be a good matchup on paper, although Elk Rapids yet to score a point on the season. Although when I saw the Kalkaska game, they looked very much capable of scoring some points. Did they look like, especially against a very good Boyne City team, they did look capable that they could have put something together against Boyne City and put some points up too? Yeah,
Eric, I actually do think they do. In the first half of their game, they actually had, I believe, one true red zone drive, another one to like about the 30, 25-yard line, and turnovers on both those drives, one on fourth down, one interception. So, I think that they have the ability to get there, but what they'll do is they'll make those mistakes, get into a hole where they can't really methodically get down the field comfortably, and then they try to force it, which just creates more turnovers. So I think the key to them this game is just keeping their pace, keeping the game within reach, not trying to do too much, and just get some points on the board.
Well, they had lost 10-0 to Kalkaska, but fumbled on a 4th and goal from the goal line, so very capable of putting points up there. And Kalkaska just lost to Oscoda for Oscoda's one win, 20-14 in overtime. So you think on paper this could be a good matchup and a potential victory for Elk Rapids should they be able to put stuff together.
Yeah, that's just really the big key is putting everything together, cohesive drives, no penalties, and more importantly, no turnovers.
Yep. So we'll move on to the next game, game that Tom Clementson will be doing this week. 0-2 Forest area going to visit 2-0 Gaylord St. Mary's. And Charles, I see you're all set back up again. You got any insight for this game coming up?
Yeah, so for this game in particular, I think it's a initial trap game for Gaylord St. Mary because what they need to do is they need to come out and quickly assert their dominance over an opponent that doesn't have the same type of talent, doesn't have the same type of strength of roster. I mean,
I was looking, it could have been a walkover game.
Yeah, and I think for Gaylord St. Mary, number one prerogative is to come out of it healthy. Obviously, you can really only ensure that, you can't, right? You can't ensure that you're going to come out of it healthy as a football game, but one thing you want to do is always make sure that your players are playing at full speed. When the player wants to play at half speed or three-quarter speed during a game, that's, as the old adage goes, is when injuries happen. So for the St. Mary team, you want to play at full speed. Make sure that you can come out, show good signs of execution, make sure that the offense and defense, those play calls are being executed by the players and they know exactly their alignment, assignment, and then being able to execute that. So AAE, alignment, assignment, execution, that's how you can continue playing good football. And for the Gaylord St. Mary's Snowbirds, I expect them to be able to do that and continue on with a 3-0 start to the season, being able to learn from mistakes while winning, and that's a good formula for success.
Awesome. I'll just keep marching on right along. Let's get to the next game, a game that you and I are going to be doing tomorrow. 2-0 Kalkaska going to 2-0 East Jordan right down the road. We're going to take the trip right up on the hill, make a left, and head up to Boswell Stadium for the game tomorrow night. Jared and I will be there making the call for us. And East Jordan 2-0 again, putting up 20 and 51 points respectively. East Jordan looks like well on their way to another march towards the playoffs. And Jared, you've seen East Jordan, and I actually saw again Kalkaska play Elk Rapids. Give me an insight on East Jordan and what to expect going into this game.
Yeah, with East Jordan, we kind of mentioned it earlier. Really, the key to their offense is William Webb. There, he's just the gadget player from last year, junior quarterback, first year as a quarterback, and he's been making great plays, but even though he might be, the ultimate, cog in the wheel, the center guard combo there is really what's going to define the game for them. If they can get Max Beal room to run and get out into open space, then I think Kalkaska is going to have a hard time trying to compete with East Jordan. They just got a lot of talent and a lot of speed out there as well.
For Kalkaska, they've got a nice three-headed monster. They're two running backs, and their quarterback was actually a running back as well. And what I like about what they're able to do is they can run with all three of them, and they'll run it around the edge. But what they'll do if a team wants to pack it in because they think it's more of a full house setup, they'll all of a sudden go to the spread and get all the defense spread out, and then they'll still go power right up the middle or try to set the quick edge or do a wham or a quick seam pass. So you'll really take advantage of their open areas. And so this could be a decent test for East Jordan. Kalkaska I don't think is quite at the level of East Jordan, so I don't know if this will be as close to the game as 2-0 teams may look going into it. But you never know what happened. That's why they play the games. And so, we'll move on to our last game of the week. And Charles, you'll be going to this one, correct? TCESF going down to Benzie Central.
Yeah, I will be going down to Benzie Central, Traverse City St. Francis. Want to give, first of all, a shout-out to Eli Harris and the athletic department down at Benzie Central, doing a great job of always making us feel welcome when we go down to their stadium and facilities. And sometimes they even make a cameo on the broadcast. So shout-out to the athletic department and staff at Benzie. But I think this game is a prime opportunity for the Traverse City St. Francis Gladiators to continue rolling along. But Benzie Central stands in their way, and this is a game where there's a lot of commonality between these two opponents. Having that proximity, Traverse City St. Francis to Benzie Central, it's only about a 30-minute drive. And for a lot of the schools that St. Francis plays, 30 minutes means they're your rival. So if you're driving 30 minutes like to Kalkaska or to Benzie or to Glen Lake, some of those teams that St. Francis frequently plays, now not so much. So this is kind of like a throwback to a 80s, 90s, early 2000s game between these two opponents where you've got family members that might live in Benzie but went to Traverse City St. Francis, or live in Traverse City that their kids go to Benzie and they went to Benzie and had a brother or cousin go to St. Francis. So there's a lot of connections in the St. Francis versus Benzie Central game. But looking at this one from an X's and O's standpoint, I think schematically the Gladiators want to get that run game going. If they can get behind their offensive line and really start leaning on the Husky defense, look for Evan Bellinger to get fed the ball early and often, running that fullback dive, and then look out when St. Francis wants to slip in that full house backfield counter play, whether it's to Lisinski coming around the edge or to Daisiak. And Daisiak had a great game last week versus Ogama Heights Falcons. He was our Team Elmer's hardest working player of the game with Ethan Daisiak. I do want to correct myself. Earlier on in the highlights, I said it was Lisinski who had those swing back passes, and it was actually Ethan Daisiak. And he was excellent, not only catching the ball, but running the ball as well in that game versus Ogama Heights. But this game against Benzie Central, I think this is an Evan Bellinger game. Get behind the offensive line, run behind John David Carlson, the center, and then just ground and pound their way to hopefully a victory over the Benzie Central Huskies. So if I'm the Traverse City St. Francis Gladiators, that's my game plan going in. And then also use it as an opportunity to get your defense straightened out and get the defense all on the same page. They do have some young players playing defense this year, a lot of juniors, but if they get the opportunity to do so, you can let that youth develop when they're not playing in such critical mass situations, and then grow from the reps. So it's all about reps, and if they can do that, they'll be 3-0 looking ahead to a game versus Grayling. But you don't want to start looking and turning the page until you've got that official W in the win column.
Well, thanks, Charles. And that's going to do it for our show tonight. We thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you're checking out all the options to be able to catch us on Next Level Broadcasting. If you're not getting to the game, check us out on nextlevelbroadcasting.net, or you can check out all the games being shown. Go to a Facebook page. You can click on that link there. It'll take you where you got to go. And make sure you are subscribing to Next Level Broadcasting on YouTube. Also, Gaylord St. Mary's fans, subscribe to Gaylord St. Mary's Athletics. And those watching Elk Rapids football can also check out elkrapidsfootball.com. For myself, Eric Huffman, Jared Stamen, Charles Strail, and the man, Shane Smith, thank you so much for watching the Next Level Broadcasting Show. We will see you at the games tomorrow. Have a great night.